Hi, I'm Jack Howell. I made a video about Franz Liszt's Dante Symphony a week or so ago, but there was a problem with it. While I cling to the idea that I'm making videos primarily to create an archive of lessons and principles for my students, and therefore I should say exactly what I want to say and ignore YouTube analytics. When the analytics tell me that 51% of those who clicked on the video went nope after 30 seconds, only 20% of viewers were left at 4 minutes, and only 6% made it to the end, I must acknowledge that I made an unwatchable video, and my students won't watch it either. So I'm trying a different approach because Liszt's Dante Symphony deserves better. It is a beautiful work that is hardly ever performed. Despite that, like Schumann 3 and the Cacciatorian Piano Concerto, it does show up on audition lists occasionally. The bass clarinet solo in Dante Symphony ranks with Wagner as some of the most beautiful writing for the instrument ever. And the literary subject of the symphony, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, and the subject of the bass clarinet solo, Francesca da Rimini, are both richly evocative. The text helps us decode the music, and an opportunity to explore that process shouldn't be wasted. But relax. This time, I'm not going to read 2 pages of the Inferno and spend 20 minutes on music theory and 13th century history. I will leave a link to the first video in the description, but consider yourself warned. As Abraham Lincoln said, people who like that sort of thing will find it to be exactly the sort of thing they like. So let's listen to the first solo, and I'll tell you what I was thinking. In the bass clarinet solo, the shape and the tempo of the first phrase comes from the words of Francesca da Rimini, the first spirit in hell to speak. The pilgrim, Dante, finds her in the second circle of hell, where those condemned for sins of lust are buffeted and torn by an infernal black wind. In real life, Francesca was a contemporary of Dante's. She was an Italian noblewoman who was placed in a political marriage to fortify a truce between warring families. She had an affair with her husband Giovanni Malatesta's younger brother Paolo, who was also married. When Giovanni caught them in flagrante delicto, he killed them both. So here Francesca and Paolo are together in the second circle of hell. They were killed together, they were condemned together, and they are clinging together for eternity. There are many layers to this onion, and in my previous video I obviously peeled too many of them. What we need to know right now is the phrase spoken by Francesca in Canto 5 of the Inferno. Liszt writes these words above the melody where the English horn plays it. Nessun maggior dolore che ricordarsi tempo felice nella miseria. There is no greater sorrow than to recall happy times in our present memory. So in the solo, yes, it says dolente, so we know to play it like we're sad, but knowing the lyrics informs how we sing. Nessun maggior dolore, dolore, sorrow, pain. So that's the first phrase. Now the second phrase. If we read Canto 5 in the Inferno, we find that Francesca is indeed miserable, and to that extent she is sorrowful, but she is not repentant. She accepts no responsibility for her plight. She blames love. Love seized Paolo. Love seized her. Her killer belongs in hell, not her. So I think the second part of the solo represents Francesca's indignance at her sentence, her defiance. There is a heroic quality to it. The top note, the F sharp, is strident. It's outside the key. It's marked with both a sforzando and a caret accent. It's approached by a crescendo, which is in the score but not the part. And once we get to the top, we storm down through a diminished seventh chord, which is more angry than sad. She's still offended, she says, by the way she was killed. Grrr. Even the descending half step at the end isn't really sad. It leaves us hanging on the fifth, which sets up a modulation for the clarinets. I think the clarinets represent the voice of the pilgrim, but rabbit hole, ignore rabbit hole. And here's another thing about the second phrase. Consider the opening of the symphony, played by the low brass, depicting the gates of hell. All hope abandon ye who enter here. I'm going to transpose it because the symphony starts appropriately in concert D minor, and now we're in F sharp minor. That may be significant. Now juxtapose that with the second phrase of the bass clarinet solo. Doesn't it sound like the bass clarinet is an answer to the brass statement? I think it is. Now, do I think this part of the solo represents defiance of the gates of hell because I hear a thematic relationship to the opening theme? Or do I hear a thematic relationship to the gates of hell because I think this part of the solo represents defiance? Well, it's the latter, actually. I only thought this listening to it in the first rehearsal. But if you find something because you were looking for it, that doesn't mean it's not real. So, a couple of clarinet nerd things to consider. When playing bass, difficulties include concealing the key mechanism and unifying the timbre. I'm not saying that I've overcome this, but there's a challenge inherent in going from a very long tube to a very short tube, and a fairly large tube at that, and not making them sound like totally different vowels. Taking the first phrase, I play the E with both pinkies down, left on the C sharp, right on the B. This assures a perfect legato from E to C sharp. Just drop the ring finger, and keeps the E dark and slightly resistance, which better matches the C sharp and helps the attack. Leaving the B down for the C sharp lowers the pitch slightly, but it also better matches the B and ensures a perfect legato. No clunking or blips moving both pinkies at once. Then I leave the right hand down for the throat register, both to keep the timbre dark to match the B and to ease crossing the break. The highest note in this first solo, the F sharp, tends to be flat, and it needs to be a little high if anything. So I fingered this with 2-3 E flat key in the right hand. Adding the ring finger opens the larger lower register vent, and the E flat key very slightly raises and brightens the pitch. The final result is an F sharp that may be a little stuffy, but it's in tune, and it's extremely stable. You can lean on it for all you're worth in it, and it won't budge or get whiny. So then the clarinets play. Then there's another violin intro, and the bass clarinet solo comes back with the same solo, a fourth higher. Well, let's listen to it. I've just got to say, I am really enjoying my new Lee Living Good mouthpiece, which I paid for. This is not a sponsored video. Okay, what's going on here? Let's put the literary research aside for the moment and look at this just in terms of musical craftsmanship. Repetition in music generally is an invitation for variation. Like in Scheherazade, the big cadenza, we want to stretch in every dimension. In Scheherazade, we want each statement to get slower and loud, be slower and louder. We want the diminuendo to start louder and get softer. We want the wiggly bit to start slower and softer and finish faster and louder. We want the ending to be more emphatic. So stretch in every dimension. Never show an audience the same trick twice. In the second solo, it's the same music, only higher. I want to start softer than I did in the first solo and be even more sorrowful. I want to compress the rest between the two phrases very slightly to give it a sense of urgency. I want the second phrase to start softer and make a larger crescendo afforded by the higher register. And I want to give the second register B at the top an even stronger, sharper accent and greater strength to the entire descending diminished seventh chord, which is indicated by rinforzato, which means reinforced. Then I want to make the penultimate note diminuendo more and make the last note even softer. The listener expects the G sharp because I was very clear in placing the D sharp in the first solo. Now it can be a whisper. I add the C sharp key to bring the G sharp down a bit. It could probably come down a bit more, honestly, but adding the B key changes the color too much. And that's that. I don't know how much of what I intended is actually audible in how I played, but that's the way it goes. Interpreting music is about having something to say, and that's how I found what I wanted to say. Again, if you want the whole spiel with the theory and the dramatic reading, that link's in the description. You've been warned. If you're interested in music at Duquesne University or Carnegie Mellon University, how to contact me is also in the description. And if you dig this stuff and feel like subscribing, that'd be cool. Go get 'em.